It is my pleasure to welcome Nina Tran into the classroom, or should I say back into the classroom, because Nina is an alumni of Cal State East Bay and CBE. She is currently the CFO of Pacaso, which is, we were just talking about it, which is one of the earliest unicorns. It's a startup. She moved there from her role as CFO of Veritas Investments. Nina has more than 26 years of experience in real estate and financial management experience here, both in private and public REITs. We learned a lot about REITs in her previous session, but here we're going to focus a lot more in terms of her leadership and career and transitions that she's made after leaving CSU East Bay. Before she moved to Veritas, she was a CFO of Starwood Waypoint Residential Trust and spent 18 years at A&B Property Corporation. She also serves on a number of boards, and we're hopefully going to have time to discuss her role on these boards too today. So welcome, Nina.
Thank you for having me.
So Nina, we're going to try and keep this a little conversational and begin with a few questions before the students jump in with theirs. So we're going to start a little backwards rather than from your time at CSU to where you are now. Can you talk a little bit about your latest move? Because the last time we spoke to you, you were at Veritas. Can you tell us a little bit about, what made you move, what motivated the change, how did you find this opportunity, and maybe a little bit about the company, which is quite exciting.
Sure, yeah, happy to. It's nice to meet everybody on Zoom. So like Asha said, or Professor Rao said, I now work for a real estate tech startup called Pacaso, representing with my sweatshirt. And Pacaso is a company, and our mission is to enrich lives by making second home co-ownership more accessible and possible for more people. And so the concept is really taking a luxury vacation home, splitting it up into 1/8 share, and each person can come in and own 1/8 of that equity versus buying the whole home. So we get a lot of question whether we're timeshare. We are not a timeshare. Timeshare is just the right to use that condo. Here it's an equity investment where you own that real estate and you actually are the owners and you get to use the home. If you buy 1/8 share, it's 44 days out of the year. And we have a special smart app that owners use to book their stay and so forth. So I've been with Pacaso for about 11 months. And when I started, I was probably employee 30 something. Today, 11 months later, we're up to about 250 employees. We are in about 35 different destinations and markets. We just expanded into Europe, Spain, and the UK. And our plan is to double in size in terms of markets by the end of 2022. So we'll be in about 60 destinations by then. So the question of why I left Veritas. So I was with Veritas, which is a private equity family-owned company that invested in multifamily apartments in San Francisco and in LA. And I joined at a time when they were also sort of growing and needed somebody to come in and help build the infrastructure for not only accounting, but for their people and culture team, as well as their technology team and risk management and just business improvements overall. So during those 5 years, I sort of hired the different team members, put in policies, procedures, and infrastructure for the company. And I felt like we got to a good place. All of my direct reports were able to manage their own, departments within HR and accounting, FP&A, and so forth. So when the opportunity came up for Pacaso, which was, early in 2021, it was through one of the co-owners of Waypoint Homes. So before Veritas, I was CFO at a company called Starwood Waypoint or Waypoint Homes, and that was single family rental. We had started a new sector based on, single families were really never an institutional class. And so we were sort of the pioneers to take single family rental to that next level. And while I was at Waypoint, I was able to take the company public as well as go through 2 M&A transactions. So the co-founder of Waypoint called me because he's now on the board of Pacaso. And so the lesson here is, you don't want to burn any bridges. Your opportunities will come up through all of your connections. But he called me and he said, hey, I am on the board of this really great company who's growing fast, who ultimately one day will want to go public, if not soon. And come do what you did for Waypoint here at Picasso. So the job sort of landed on my lap. And after I spoke to the executive team and the co-founders, it was just really exciting for me to take on another opportunity to help grow the company and possibly take it public.
Okay. So it sounds like you were ready for a change and you jumped on board, and you also had good relationships with the people who were there already. How's it going now in terms of the work, and is it different from what it was like at Veritas?
It's definitely different. So it's more technology driven, whereas Veritas was more real estate focused. Here we finished a Series C fundraise back in August timeframe. So we're still early. We only launched in October of 2020. The company has only been around for about a little over a year. And so right now, for me, what's different is the pace is like tenfold of a private company that is, in a stage where they want to get to a Series D raise and potentially a crossover round and potentially an IPO. I think from a technology company perspective, there's much more focus on marketing and brand spend to get our name out there, to be sort of the recognized co-ownership model for vacation homes. So if you think about Airbnb or an Uber early days, right? Not a lot of people knew about the company, and they were disruptor companies. Picasso is trying to do the same thing for this co-ownership model, to be the disruptor company, so that people don't need to buy a whole home anymore. They can do just a fractional share. And so my experience here, I still oversee finance and accounting, obviously, but I also still oversee people and talent. That aspect is really interesting because I'm always looking for ways to enhance our culture. And I've always been a people person, so that came naturally in terms of just helping to oversee our HR group as well.
Okay. So is that unusual or normal, Nina? Because these are two separate functions, and we have students here who are finance majors and students here who are HR majors, and you're kind of like bridging both in your roles, both here, and it looks like you've done it in your past assignments too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the company. There have been, and there are many companies where the CFO also oversees HR. But then there are other companies where HR reports directly into maybe the CEO or the chief operating officer. So I think it just depends on where you are in the stage of your growth, and also the executive team members who are in place based on their experience and how much they can handle.
Okay, so I'm going to talk, actually ask a little bit more around these two pieces that you have out here. And we've actually discussed with our students about how you begin as an independent contributor and you specialize in a particular area. But as you move up into leadership, you need to really broaden the scope of what you do. Can you talk a little bit about that transition from being kind of a finance person to taking on more, I guess, leadership and broader responsibilities? Were there any issues in the transition? What did you like? What did you not like? Or what did you have to learn as you moved up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think early on in my career, and I would probably recommend this, early on, you probably want to specialize in an area where you have passion around, and you want to be able to build up your specialty, whether it's accounting or HR or finance specifically. But as you move up in your career and you start managing teams, I think you can become more of a generalist because you've built that expertise under you, and you just understand enough to be able to ask the right questions, think about strategy overall. And for me, it sort of came naturally. Like I said, I was really always interested in building culture and building people's career and helping them develop. And so my interest in HR and that people and talent piece was always part of my career growth as well. And so I think, starting out in accounting and then moving to more managerial and then getting an aspect of how do you interact with different departments gives you a good sense of becoming a generalist as you excel in your career path.
Great. Thank you. So that's going to trigger my next question as we're kind of moving backwards. A lot of these students are really starting off their careers. Can you kind of take us back in terms of your career pathway from when you graduated from CSUEB and the kind of things you did that led you down this path? That is the first one. And the second piece to that is, when you first started, did you think that this is where you were going to be, or have there been kind of twists and turns in your journey?
Yeah, so I interviewed on campus, right? On campus recruiting, and I got a job. Back then it was Big 8, so I'm dating myself. So now it's one of the Big 4 public accounting firms. Back then it was Big 8. And so I got recruited by Coopers & Lybrand. I started my career with CNL, which is now part of PricewaterhouseCoopers. And so I started in the audit field, doing that for about 4 years. And it's a great way to get experience because you get exposure to different industries while learning the big picture of financials, how companies work and so forth. So it's invaluable experience, in my opinion. From there, I was recruited to join AMB, which is now called Prologis, to be a financial manager. And so when I came on board, Prologis was small. It was just based in San Francisco with one office, and it was focused on industrial. I was there for 18 years. So between day 1 to 18 years, I think I had probably 6 or 7 different roles during that time. And I think most of that is because I just raised my hand a lot for different projects. And we went from one single office to, by the time I left, probably 40 different offices in 24 different countries with multiple currencies and time zones. And so the progression of growth was really exciting for me, and that's why I stayed so long. But also my roles changed over that course of 18 years, and I was able to do different aspects of my job. And part of that was like being part of the team that traveled to different countries to open up new offices. And so that was fun. And then we went through a merger. AMB merged with Prologis in 2011. At that time, I was Chief Accounting Officer. They asked me to head up the merger and acquisition piece of integration. So basically, you take 2 of everything when you're going through an M&A transaction, right? 2 companies, 2 cultures, and blend it into one. So I headed up integration and was able to work through all of the various kinks with that. And then from Prologis, this was sort of my turning point. I was there for so long that I was comfortable. And a recruiter, and every year when a recruiter calls, I keep saying, no, I'm not interested, I'm happy here. But that one particular year, I think I was 2 years into the integration work. And I thought, maybe this is time for me to do something different. Maybe this is the time for me to take that next step to become a CFO. And so the CFO role opened up with Waypoint Homes. And that was probably one of my better decisions, even though it was hard to leave a global, public, very stabilized company and go into almost a startup company that was low in cash, low in liquidity, new, trying to pioneer the single family rental business. But it gave me an opportunity to really step up and step out of my comfort zone to be able to learn so much, right? I didn't know how to be a CFO. I saw other people, I worked for a CFO at Prologis, but it really allowed me to ask a lot of questions and probe and learn, and it actually opened up opportunities for me. So once I became CFO of Waypoint and was able to help take that company public, board opportunities came up for me. And I was able to join a public board because I was a CFO of a public company. And I think that was a great experience. But then from there, we went through 2 M&As. We closed down our office in the Bay Area. And that's when I moved to Veritas, which I went from public craziness to more private, stable company. And then Veritas is, I moved to Picasso, which we talked about earlier.
And is it the craziness or is it stable now? I'm just kidding.
I'm now back to crazy, which I had missed when I was at Veritas.
Okay, so I mean that's very interesting to see the ebb and flow of your career and the choices you're making at different stages. You spoke about the fact that the latest one was because one of your someone else you'd worked with recruited you essentially for this position. Can you talk a little? We're going to talk to the students about mentors and sponsors and allies. Can you talk a little bit about the mentors or sponsors you've had in your career, and perhaps some advice on how people find people to mentor or sponsor them?
Yeah, I think it's so important during all of our careers, even now, for us to have not only mentors, but champions who go to bat for you. I think, as I think back on my career, the CFO at that time was really my mentor and my champion, because every time an opportunity came up and I sort of raised my hand and said, hey, can I help with that? He would go to bat and say, hey, Nina can do this, give her a chance, right? And he was there to support and guide and so forth. And so I think it's important for all of us to think about, where do we want to head? Who are those people that we want to emulate? And reach out. I mean, I actually have spoken at panels, and afterwards people just come up and say, would you be my mentor? Whether because I'm a woman or a minority or, in the financial field. And I've had probably 3 just random people who have now been my mentee for the last 6-7 years, who all they had to do was ask, right? And so I think we should think about who out in the field might be someone that you want to get advice from. I think it's also important to have a mix of both men and women mentors and champions, because they have different perspective. And so, I think as you continue to build your career, reach out to people. Even if you think they may say no, the worst they can say is no, and then you reach out to another person. But most of the time, if they have capacity, they want to help and they want to give back. And so you'll be surprised that many will say yes.
Okay. So when things calm down for you, we're going to reach out to you and ask you if you want to be a mentor in the leadership program, because we have a lot of really wonderful students with us, but we'll wait for things to calm down.
Yeah.
So Nina, I wanted to pick up on something else you spoke about. You spoke about taking a firm IPO, you spoke about mergers and acquisitions, and my assumption is that in this role, you negotiated a number of things. There's been some research that shows that women don't negotiate much. And I mean, right now we're finding that these things are changing just a little bit. So can you talk through negotiations and the kind of things you've been involved in, and perhaps style or tips or anything around that, around negotiations?
Sure. I think as a CFO, it's part of our jobs to negotiate, almost on a daily basis. When you are out trying to hire third-party providers or bankers or financing or auditors, it's always, making sure that you budget what you need, and then you negotiate with those providers to stay within that budget. And so I think, and a lot of the providers expect it from you, right? They're going to offer you a fee. Most of the time, they know CFOs are going to push back and ask for something lower. So I think that should be part of our natural program to say, hey, what makes sense to you? What's the value that you're getting for it? And negotiate and push back in terms of what you think is the value of that service that's being provided. So it doesn't come naturally to everybody. I think a lot of us have to work at it. Sometimes being a woman is also harder, because you feel like, okay, we shouldn't ask for everything, but I would say ask for it. Again, the worst they can say is no. And if you choose another vendor, that's okay too. But most vendors want your business. Most service providers want you as a client. And so you'll end up somewhere in between what they propose and what you negotiated. So normally it works out that way.
Is there anything that you can share with us on any really interesting negotiation or something that happened that kind of, as the story that you can share with the class? I know a lot of what you do is confidential. But
I think, just thinking about debt, when you place financing for your company, it's about the banks or the institution provides a term sheet, and they'll lay out what the rates are, what the fees for origination would be, what the unused fees would be. I think you just need to think about what's market, do some research. What is market? Reach out to other people who are sort of in that field who are also competing for your business, and push back on where you think the market should be. And if you've got the leverage in terms of knowing that they really want you as a client, then you can be more aggressive in how you negotiate. So that's just a simple example. I mean, you know, financing, you're constantly going to have to push back on the lenders.
Okay. Thank you, Nina. I have just a couple more questions before we open it up for our students to ask questions here. And I'm going to raise one issue. We sometimes see the face of the pandemic is female, and women have been impacted quite in a number of ways with the 2-year pandemic that we've been living through. Can you talk a little bit about how it's impacted perhaps you or women in the workplace, or even Pacaso? Has this changed anything here?
I mean, I think it's impacted all of us, not just women specifically, but it takes a toll, right? It's a mental toll sometimes to be on Zoom all day. So I think we all need to be more conscientious about taking breaks and so forth. But for women, I know during the pandemic, I was still at Veritas, and having to set up remote work, making sure that we're thinking about our employees. Are they safe? Those that have young kids at home, how do we make sure they balance the workload with the childcare? All of that definitely impacts more of the mothers who normally had to balance motherhood with their career. I think from Picasso's perspective, it actually is helping our model. And Picasso, actually, we're 100% fully distributed workforce. We have no offices. Everybody works remotely from anywhere, which is great. And in fact, I am in Hawaii this week, working from Hawaii. And so I think the pandemic has really moved our work environment to more of a hybrid, if not fully social norm now. Excuse me. So the last survey we saw, 40% of companies are going hybrid, which allows Pacaso to be able to enhance our business plan in terms of allowing more people to buy second homes. Excuse me for a minute.
Sure. That's very interesting, because even in terms of us looking for speakers to come in and talk to our students, we found that in the last couple of years, a lot of senior executives were saying, okay, I don't need to stay in the Bay Area. I can actually move to my second home in Tahoe and work out of there. And that trend actually have grown even more in this time.
Yeah, and it's been great for recruiting, because I can recruit from anywhere, right? And so it's not limited to just the Bay Area, which is pretty expensive to hire great talent. And now I've got teams in Cincinnati, Chicago, Tampa, New York. And so it really opens up the field of candidates that we can recruit from. And now, you know, we're expanding in Europe, so hiring in Amsterdam and Spain and so forth. So definitely a positive if you've got a company culture that embraces that. The downside is you have to think about, how do you stay connected to everybody as we grow from 30 people to 250 to 600 or whatever? How do you can maintain that culture of transparency and connectivity and so forth? So we do a lot of things where, you know, once a year we get the whole crew together and do on-site retreat of 3 days of team building as well as strategic planning. And then outside of that, then each department also has our own smaller retreat. So in a couple of weeks, I'm taking my teams to Palm Springs, and we'll do 2 days of, again, strategy, but also team building. So, you know, you have to sort of balance this work from home environment with some in-person hybrid as well.